Shelach on Perik Yud Daled Pasuk, page 806. Page 806. So, page 806. So first of all, sit anywhere on, just don't block the camera. You got chumashim, what do you call it? Bring chumashim for the guys.
Huh?
No, I'm talking to him. Bring chumashim. Take one of the big blue books.
Did you retrofit No, it just says this.
Okay, gentlemen, let's go. 806. V'avdi kalev ekev haisa ruach acheres imo. So Hashem is talking about the punishment. Those of you who are not here, we're talking about the spies. The spies come back and they bring a negative report and everybody gets upset. And then the Torah talks about how Hashem describes a punishment that they're going to get for, because they cried. So we're going to see their punishment in a second. But the Torah says over here, Avdi Kalev Ekev Haisa Ruach Acheres Imo, 4 lines from the bottom, 806. Avdi Kalev, my servant Kalev, because he had a different attitude, Vayamole Acharai, and he was loyal, he followed me loyally. Vaviosi Velarz Asher Bashama, I'm going to bring him to the land. Vizaro Yerushanas, all the Jewish people are going to die. All the Jewish people are going to die, and Kalev is going to be the one who's going to go into the land of Israel. So we had spoken a couple of days ago about the fact that Kaleb, what does it mean? He had a different attitude. Different attitude means that he's a loyal servant. He's called a loyal servant because when the prevailing attitude around you, when there's peer pressure or people around you are doing something and you're willing to go up against the group, so that's serious loyalty to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's what we have mentioned. And in a world where the attitudes are anti-Torah and antithetical to Torah, and a person is willing to go against the prevailing attitudes or values of a society, so then he's a, what do you call it? That he can sit over here, by the way, two good seats over here, and you get even a better look at me, Moshe. What do you call it? The prevailing attitudes are negative or anti-Torah, they're immoral, or they're whatever it is, and a person's willing to fight against that. So that shows loyalty to God. That's the first idea. We spoke about that idea. There's another idea contained over here, and that idea is based on something it says in the Gemara. The Gemara says there was a king. The Gemara in Avodah Zarah. The Gemara says there was a king who hated the Jews. Could you believe it? Right? There's a Caesar. Caesar means a Caesar, some Roman king. He hated the Jews. He said to the officials of his kingdom, somebody who's got a bad sore on his foot, should he cut it off and be relieved, or should he should he just leave it there and suffer? Obviously, alluding to the Jewish people who are worth no more than a blister on the foot. So they said to him, you ought to cut it off. So one of his ministers was a man named Katia Bar Shalom. That wasn't his original name. He probably had a Roman name. But his name now in the Gemara is called Katia Bar Shalom. Somehow he got a Jewish name. We'll see why. So he said to them, he spoke up and he said, first of all, you can't. You won't be able to succeed in killing the Jews and annihilating the Jews. Because there's a verse. And the verse says that the Jewish people are scattered to the 4 corners of the earth, and they're compared to the wind. And the same way that that the world cannot exist without wind, the world can't exist without the Jews. The world can't exist without the Jews. I mean, where would we get Chinese restaurants from if not from the Jews? So the world can't exist without the Jews. Number one, practically, it's not going to work. You're not going to be able to wipe out the Jews, practically. And number two, even if you do, then you're going to be called a deficient kingdom because you're missing one of your people. Good logical argument. So the king said to him, you know what, you've spoken well. However, anybody who ever gets the best of the king in an argument gets tossed into a burning furnace. So he was led out to his execution. In other words, sometimes in life, be smart, man. Don't be right. Right? It's like marriage. right? Except in marriage, it's worse than a burning furnace. So, so this is a burning furnace. That's nothing. So what do you call it? Don't be smart. Don't be right. So what do you call it? So the guy was being led out to his death. So a Roman noblewoman said to him, "Wow, it's a shame for the ship to pass by without paying the tax." That means you're about to die for the Jewish people. Why don't you join them? So the guy, what do you call it? He somehow, not clear how he did it, if he grabbed a knife or something, he circumcised himself. And then he said, "Good, I paid the tax, now I could go through." So when he died, and then they executed him. And when he died, a heavenly voice came out and said, "Ketia bar Shalom." Now the word ketia means to be cut off. So that alludes to the fact that he circumcised himself. Ketia bar Shalom, the son of Shalom, means well-being. A heavenly voice came out and said, "Ketia bar Shalom gets immediate entrance into Olam Haba, into the world to come, into paradise." Heavenly voice came out and announced that. Do not pass go, do not collect 200, straight into Gan Eden. Bacha Rebbe. Rebbe Yehuda Anasi cried. Rebbe Yehuda Anasi, Rebbe, who compiled the Mishnah, he heard that heavenly voice and he cried. Why did he cry? Amar, yesh kone olamo b'shah achas. Some people acquire their eternity in one moment. V'yesh kone olamo b'kamashah. Some people got to spend years doing it. There are people in one moment you could acquire your eternity. That's the first situation here the Gemara says. Then the Gemara later on says that there's a guy named Elazar ben Durdaya, one of the most, also a famous character. And the Gemara says Elazar ben Durdaya was a lowlife. And this Elazar ben Durdaya visited with every harlot in the world. A real lowlife. And he heard about one very high-priced lady. And he went to visit with her. And at the last moment, before the Avera began, he went to visit with this harlot, a high-priced harlot, and he made an appointment with her, and they were ready to sin, and at the last moment, she broke wind. So the Gemara says, she broke wind. Hold the comments. She broke wind. And so she made a philosophical lesson out of it. I mean, I guess she needs to, she's kind of embarrassed, I guess, so turn it into philosophy. So she said to him, "The same way that I can't take that one back, you cannot do tshuva." How's that? How's that for turning the tables? All right? So he went and he stood between the mountains and he said, "Mountains and valleys, please beg for mercy for me." I mean, this guy had a track record this guy was a real. And the mountains and valleys said to him, "Listen, we got our own troubles. We can't help you." So he said, "Heavens and earth, help me out." They said, "We got our own issues. We can't help you." So eventually he said, "Eina dover tolu yalabi." It's all dependent on me. He put his head between his knees and he cried until his soul left him. The head between the knees represents a fetal position. That means he went into his fetal position representing purity. A baby before he's born had not sinned. And he cried. It doesn't mean he just cried. It means he cried in tshuva. True regret. True regret. There was once a movie, True Grit. Right? This is true regret. We'll make a movie out of it. Right? John Weinberg. Right? It was true regret. And he died. That's some regret. He cried till he died. And another heavenly voice came out and said, "Rebbe Elazar ben Durdaya gets immediate entrance to the world to come." And again, Rebbe Yehuda Anasi heard this voice. And when Rebbe Yehuda Anasi, he said, "Not enough." Rebbe Yehuda Anasi cried, he said, "Some people acquire their world in one moment, and some acquire it over the course of time." Then he cried even more, he said, "And not only that, they call him Rebbe." Because his name was Elazar ben Durdaya. He was not a rabbi. He was anything but. And when the heavenly voice came out and said, "Rebbe Elazar ben Durdaya gets a portion of the world, gives immediate entrance into what do you call it, the world to come." So he said, not only got tshuva, not did tshuva, but he got smicha. Right? That's some smicha. Yeah. Wow. Okay. Then there's one more case. You all heard, you're familiar with the case, Rabbi Chanina ben Teradyon. We read on Yom Kippur and on Tisha B'Av, the 10 martyrs. the 10 martyrs who are tortured to death, including Rabbi Akiva. Remember the famous 10 martyrs. Rabbi Chanina ben Teradion is the one. They wrapped in a Sefer Torah, and they burnt him, burning him alive. And the Roman executioner said to him, they soaked him, they wrapped him in a Sefer Torah, and they put hot compresses around him so that the burning will take longer. So they set him in a fire, but the torture should be longer. So the Roman executioner said to him, if I remove those compresses, will you get me into the world to come? He said, yeah. He said, swear. I said, I swear I'll get you into the world to come. So he removed the compresses, so Reb Chanina ben Teradion would die sooner. And then he jumped into the fire too. And a heavenly voice came out and said, Rabbi Chanina ben Teradion and their executioner go immediately into Olam Haba. And again, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi heard the heavenly voice and he cried. He said, some people acquire the world in one moment. So the first question here is, why was he crying? I mean, he should be happy. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi should be happy. Yeah, that's terrific. Everybody goes into the world to come. Well, what could be better? In one moment, you go into the world to come. Guy didn't have to, a Roman executioner. Yeah, Roman executioners were never known for their soft spot. Roman executioners were generally, kind of nasty guys. They weren't. It's not like, oh, hi, have a nice day. Right? They weren't these Roman executioners, and yet he did it, which is miraculous in and of itself. The Roman executioner got involved. And then a heavenly voice comes out and says the Roman and Ketia bar Shalom was a Roman. He did a circumcision on himself, and then at the last minute he goes into the world to come. So why was Rabbi Yehuda Nasi crying? So some people make it in one moment, and some people make it in the course of a lifetime. You know why he's crying? He's crying because of all the wasted moments. He's crying because of all the wasted moments. We never know when that moment is. We don't know when that moment is, and sometimes we bypass the moment. Sometimes that moment could be saying thank you to a bus driver in Israel as you get off the bus. That might be the moment of a Kiddush Hashem. He said, wow, a Torah Jew says thank you, wow. Even if he closed the door on you. Right? So get your foot out and say thank you. But we don't know when that moment is. That moment might be when, help some old lady on the street carrying packages. That moment might be that you got in college, that, you may got up and you refused to participate with your friends when they were having some sort of what they call a party. Right? What we call other things, but that's what and you refuse to participate. Maybe that's the moment. That's why Rabbi Yehuda Nasi is crying. What's it got to do with Kaleb ben Yehuda, with Kaleb? So what did Kaleb do? Kaleb stood up against the Jewish people. Kaleb was the voice against, everybody's upset, the tribes come back, the spies come back, and they discourage the people. And Kaleb stands up and he says, no, it's a good land, we can do it, we're going to go in. At that moment, the Medrash says, Kaleb acquired his world to come. In one moment, that's why it says, Kaleb ben Yehuda, ekev haisa ruach hacheres. Because Kaleb did that, he stood up against them, in one moment he acquires his world to come. That's what a person is capable. And there's another man named Bilam, the Goyish prophet. Remember Bilam? And Bilam gives the advice to Balak to trap up the Jewish people with the Moabite girls. He loses his world to come right at that moment. Some people could get it in a moment, and some people could lose it in a moment. You could gain your world to come in one moment, you could lose it in a moment. Again, we can't take chances because we don't know when that moment is. We don't know if we'll have that moment. There we go. We got to get up and put on tefillin every day because we don't know. But a person could, in one moment, could do something. That's why Rabbi Yehuda Nasi is crying. He says, listen, look what a moment is worth. Look what one moment is worth. I mean, how much is a second worth? How much is a second worth, gentlemen? Not much, right? Wrong. Not only a second was worth, I could prove to you a tenth of a second or 100th of a second is worth millions. You know where? In the Olympic 100-yard dash. Because the guy who wins by 100th of a second then becomes famous and he gets a lot of money and becomes drug addicted. Whereas the guy behind him, the guy who finishes second, he's just got to get up and go to work. He's an accountant. Nobody remembers who finished second. But the guy who finishes first, well, by 100th of a second, that makes all the difference in life. 100th of a second. Look at all the seconds we got in life. Every moment, every second in life, every word we say could be that moment that determines our eternal fate. So Kaleb ben Yehuda with a word, he stood up against it. It wasn't easy. That's the first idea. Now, when I get to the second idea, this is the main idea I wanted to get to. I ask a question. Imagine the following. A guy's in the hospital, and he's on a respirator. And the doctors say, listen, there's no hope. We're going to disconnect him. We're going to disconnect him from the respirator, what we call murder. I don't know why you got to have the doctor do it, what they call mercy killing. Mercy killing. The doctor is going to disconnect. I know you don't need to be a doctor to disconnect them. All you need is a 7-year-old to go rip the cord out of the wall. What do you need a doctor for? And what they ought to do if it's mercy killing is they ought to honor his wife or his brother or his son. We give you the honor of having mercy on dad. Go ahead, pull the cord. Why do you need a doctor for? Not sure. So the guy, you're walking through a hospital. You're walking through a hospital. And you see somebody who's reaching for a plug. He's about to disconnect the patient. And you say, hey, stop, that's murder. And you grab his hand. And you keep his hand off the plug for a minute. Then eventually he gets his hand through, he pulls the plug, and the patient dies. Did you accomplish anything in that moment that you kept his hand off the plug? Don't answer that question yet, right? Don't answer it yet. Just think about that for a second. Okay, we're going to come back to that. Now, there's a Mishnah in Pirkei Avos that says, have a zahir b'mitzvah kala k'v'chamura. You're familiar with the Mishnah. Be careful with what seems to be a trivial mitzvah or a light mitzvah. Be as careful with that as you are with heavy mitzvahs. Why? She'enata yodea matan scharan shel mitzvahs. You don't know the reward for the mitzvah. You don't know what the reward of a mitzvah is. What does that mean? We don't know the reward of a mitzvah. We know the reward of a mitzvah. Not only we know the reward, we know how reward is calculated, because the same Pirkei Avos says, Lefum Tzara Agra. Pirkei Avos says that reward is proportional to the effort exerted in the mitzvah. An easy mitzvah doesn't get as much reward as a more difficult mitzvah. So we do know that in certain mitzvahs we would imagine certain mitzvahs have more reward than other mitzvahs. On the other hand, there's a aspect of the mitzvahs that we're not aware of, which is that, there's a guy once, a documented incident. There's a guy goes to a doctor. This is documented. Guy goes to a doctor, and a frum guy goes to a doctor. Doctor's a secular Jew, and the doctor examines him, and he says, listen, you have a terminal illness, and you really have two choices here. You can either let the disease run its course, and then within 6 months you'll die relatively painlessly, or we could start a course of treatment which will make you very uncomfortable, very unpleasant, but it'll extend your life by 3 or 4 years. What would you like to do? Guy says to him, I don't know, I have to ask my Rav. So he went to Rav Moshe Feinstein. So Rav Moshe said to him, listen, let's make a calculation. In the next 4 years, how many times will you be able to put on tefillin? How many words of Torah will you learn? How many times will you make kiddush? How many times will you put on tefillin? Will you say Amen Yehei Shmei Rabbah? It's according to halacha, you have to try to preserve your life. You have to try to keep yourself alive as long as possible. The guy says, okay, goes back to the doctor. Doctor says to him, okay, come back in 4 weeks. It takes 4 weeks to get everything set up, the chemicals and the dosages and everything else, and we'll start the treatment. Okay. 4 weeks later, he comes to the hospital. And he goes to the door, Dr. Goldstein, he knocks on the door, come in, he walks in, and Dr. Goldstein's not there. There's some guy sitting behind the desk, got a big black yarmulke, he's wearing tzitzis over his shirt, got a little bit of a beard, and he says, sorry, I'm looking for Dr. Goldstein. He starts backing out. He says, it's me. Does a double take. Sure enough, it's Dr. Goldstein. He goes, whoa, what happened? What's going on? I saw you 4 weeks ago. You didn't have... He says, listen, I've been an oncologist for 30 years. In all the years of my medical experience, I never had a patient who chose to go through the pain. I went to speak to your Rabbi Moshe Feinstein to find out why you're making this choice. And we talked, and he explained to me what Torah is, what life is about, and so on and so forth. And since that time, I have become a Baal Tshuva. And my family became a Baal Tshuva, and we're committed Torah Jews because Rabbi Feinstein influenced me, and your division influenced me. Now, let me ask you a question. When this guy originally went to Rav Moshe Feinstein, think about this. He went to Rav Moshe Feinstein, and Rav Moshe told him what he's going to accomplish in the next 4 years. But he never said a word about somebody who's going to influence. And now whatever this guy does, whatever mitzvahs this Dr. Goldstein does and his family does, who's credited? Who gets the credit? It's this Jew now shares in that as well. That's what the Mishnah means by matan schoron shel mitzvahs. Be careful even with a light mitzvah. Because even when you do an insignificant mitzvah, if somebody else is influenced by you, you now have shares in his mitzvah. How much exactly? Only God knows. But let's say I'm sitting here and I say, oh, there's somebody comes out, I put some money in the tzedakah. And you see me and you go, oh, right, I didn't give tzedakah today. So you put money, I have shares in your tzedakah. Because I am the one who caused you to give the tzedakah. How much? Again, only God can determine that. But at the end of the day, it's your behavior or what you've done has influenced somebody else. So that's how it works. There are shares over here. Okay? Idea number one. By the way, there's an Israeli, but yeah, go ahead, Nick.
This is kind of just things you said a minute ago, that the reward for the mitzvahs is how much effort that you put in.
That's one of the factors.
Does that take into account the level of effort required by people of different, like a from guy? It's not so.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Very important point. Absolutely. Ironically, sometimes the from guy needs to put in more effort. Because a guy who's putting on tefillin, I once gave you the example, if you walk into a shul and you see two guys putting on tefillin, and one guy's putting on like this, like that, then you see a second guy going like this. And I say to you, okay, which one is the FFB and which one's the Baal Tshuva? And you gotta lay down a bet. Right? Which one of those is the from guy, the from birth, or fractured from birth, and which one is the Baal Tshuva? What would you bet on? Ironically, sometimes it's the fact the Baal Tshuva sometimes has a strange advantage that is a little more exciting. Your average from guy makes a bracha, doesn't know if he's benching or making the bracha before the eating. Sometimes he wraps the tefillin around his head 7 times. Whereas somebody who's not, the uninitiated sometimes more excited. On the other hand, there's no question that a guy who's 7th generation from Bnei Brak, and he speaks Aramaic, right? And the worst thing he's ever done is bench too fast, right? And there are certain expectations of him that a guy who's a Baal Tshuva from Iowa, well, no, it can't be. There are no people in Iowa. But if a guy's a Baal Tshuva who only found out about this when he was 26 years old, and he's struggling with it, can barely read Hebrew, there's no question that he's going to get for the same thing, he gets greater reward. No question about it. As somebody with a personality, who's born with a more selfish personality versus somebody who's born with one of these giving personalities, and they both perform an act of giving. So the guy with the selfish, it's not his fault he was born selfish. It's not his fault. But he's overcome that trait, so of course he gets more schar. No question about it. All these factors are taken. That's why there's a supercomputer up there that only God knows exactly what's taken into consideration. Your background, your personality, your abilities, your challenges in life, or for the guys from Cleveland, all the various factors that can affect the person negatively or positively. It's all taken into account. So what do you call it? So there's this Israeli Baal Tshuva. It's documented also, Israeli Baal Tshuva. So how did he become a Baal Tshuva? His friends asked him how he became a Baal Tshuva. This guy said I think I told you guys this once, he was sitting in we'll get back to Kaleb in a second. I'll tell you why I'm telling you this. He was sitting in a club somewhere in Dizengoff Square in Tel Aviv. I don't know if any of you have ever been to Dizengoff. I think I was in Dizengoff once in my life. It's not quite the same as Bnei Brak. And what do you call it? I mean, they're crowded buildings, but in one place it's called shuls, the other it's called bars. And so this guy was sitting in a what do you call it? He was sitting in a club with his friend doing whatever it is people do in clubs, and all of a sudden this 17-year-old yeshiva guy, black hat, black suit, starts cutting across Dizengoff Square. And the guy's looking out, he happened to be looking out the window, he sees a 17-year-old yeshiva guy, and he's looking straight at the ground. And he's watching the guy. The kid he's got his eyes firmly placed on the ground, and he's walking. And this guy says to his friends, "1 second, I got to check something." And he walks out and follows this kid all the way across Dizengoff. Follows him all the way across Dizengoff. He said later, never once did he pick up his eyes to look around in Dizengoff, which apparently there are other interesting things to look at. Never once did he pick up his eyes. He said to himself, if there's a force in the world that could get a 17-year-old male to not look around in Dizengoff, I have to find out what it is. So he went and checked it out, got to yeshiva, became a Baal Tshuva, and everybody lived happily ever after. And that yeshiva guy, now all the mitzvahs that he does, that yeshiva guy, all he did is he kept, why he's on Dizengoff, I don't know. You know, maybe he could have gone a different route, possibly, or possibly he couldn't have. Maybe he had to get an eye doctor's appointment or something. But at the end of the day, whatever he did, it exerts an influence, and that influence that he has on this guy, now he has a share in his mitzvahs. You understand? That's what it means. Okay. So, I just tell you one more incident. This is one of my favorites. This is also documented. There's in the old days, back in the days where we had telephones that you had to actually dial. No, you guys probably never seen those. Yeah. Actually, and you know what happened if we got a busy signal? You know what happened? We had to dial again, Nick. You know, how do you like that? Well, we made it. Here we are. Ha ha ha. Right? Finger hurts a little bit, but we made it. So back in the day, they used to have, before the days of computers, you couldn't, if you wanted to look something up, they used to have something called microfilms in the libraries. You go to a library. I used to do when we were studying for finals. They had microfilms in the library. I remember going to go checking microfilm, whatever it was. I never studied because some of the microfilms were really interesting stuff, like sports from the 20s, you know, that sort of thing. So I always got distracted. But they had these microfilms. So there's a Sephardi yeshiva guy who goes to the library of Hebrew University. Hebrew University used to have all the old Rambam and the old documents and all the what do you call it? So he's researching. He's doing some research one morning. He leaves. He goes to the document. He goes to the library at Hebrew University, and what do you call it? And then he finishes. He's there for a couple hours. He takes out his food and he starts to eat. And he has to bench. So he starts benching. He says, "Shaloni vos, shaloni kolem, veloni kashel olam." We not stumble. So the librarian is a girl. She comes over and she says, "Listen, I come from a traditional home. I'm not religious, but we used to bench at one point, and I know that you don't say veloni kashel in the benching. There's no such nusach as saying veloni kashel." Yes, there is. No, there isn't. That's entirely possible in Israel, by the way. In Israel, you could get these sort of arguments. Right? In America, nobody can say anything because you get sued. In Israel, everybody's got something to say about your behavior. Things in Israel are different. The train here once stopped, by the way. Those of you see the light rail? It's about 100 yards from the entrance of Ohr Somayach. Do you know that this train once stopped? It was there at Pesach. Some guys from Ohr Somayach were outside burning their chametz. The train stopped. The conductor ran off the train, came over with his bread. He said, "Hey, I'm looking for a fire." And the train stopped because he had to burn his chametz. Yeah, that wouldn't happen in New York. Right? And nobody says boo on the train here. Nobody would say boo. And if anybody would say, "Hey, ma karepo?" Ma, what, you don't see what's happening? He's got to burn his chametz. What's wrong with you? It's the most logical thing in the world. What's your problem? It's Pesach? So what he calls it's Israel. Things work there. Okay, so she says to him, "There's no such no veloni kashel." So he says to her, "Yes, there is." "No, there is." They start arguing. So he goes home. He says, "Look, I'll send you a copy of a siddur that there is a nusach that says veloni kashel in benching." But nusach means the formula, the what's it called, the formula of the benching. There is veloni kashel. We do, or maybe not stumble. So he goes to what he called. He goes home. A few weeks later, he finally remembers. He takes an old Sephardi siddur with the words veloni kashel, circles the words veloni kashel, may we not stumble. He circles it in red, and he sends it off to the library, to this librarian. Okay, ad kan hakafa aleph. End of round one. Round two is about 2 years later. This guy's married, and he's living in Bnei Brak. And one day he gets a wedding invitation. Takes a look at the invitation, doesn't recognize the name of the bride, the groom, nobody. He figures his name is a common Sephardi name. His name is Chaim Cohen. Probably a mistaken identity. He shouldn't have gotten the invitation. Okay, the night of the wedding, he's on his way home. He has a chavrusa, and he's on his way home. And his route home took him past the wedding hall. So he said, "All right, I'll check. Let's see, maybe." He walks in, takes a look around, doesn't recognize a soul. He turns around to leave, gets a tap on the shoulder. The guy says, "Slicha, ata Chaim Cohen?" He says, "Yeah, the kala would like to speak to you. The bride would like to speak to you." He was a frum guy, Well, this is highly irregular. I'll meet her at the mechitza. Right? So he goes over to the mechitza, and the bride walks over, flutter, flutter, flutter. "Remember me?" He looks, he goes, "No. She goes, "Remember about 2 years ago, you were in Hebrew University, you were doing some research? There was a secular girl over there, we had an argument, veloni kashel." "Oh, yeah, that was me." I said, "Okay." She goes, "I want to tell you, at the time, I was in the middle of a relationship with an Arab. And one day he called me up, and he said, 'Either you marry me or I dump you.' And I went home and I thought over his very romantic proposal. And with what else was going on in my life, I decided that I'd marry him. And the day that I decided I'd say yes, I got a letter in the mail, and I open it up and I pull out an old yellowed page of a Sephardi, photocopy of Sephardi Siddur, with the words "Velo nikashel," may we not stumble, circled in red. And I thought to myself, ooh, somebody's trying to tell me something. So I picked up the phone, I said, Waleed, you are dumped, right? And then I went to a seminary for Baalas Tshuvas to find out why it is exactly I'm not marrying him. And today I'm marrying a yeshiva guy. And I want you to know that you're the most important guest at this wedding. Because all of the mitzvahs and all of the Torah observance and all of the learning Torah that happens in our home, you have shares in that. Because it's your result of it. Now what did the guy do? This is documented, by the way. Documented incident. What did the guy do? He picked up a marker and circled it and sent it in the mail. And as a result of that, he now has, listen to what's happening here, gentlemen. He has eternal dividends in whatever's going to come out of that home. Rav Moshe Feinstein, that man has eternal dividends in an entire home. It's not just one-off. It's the children and the grandchildren. That's why the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos says, Matan Schoron Shel Mitzvos. Matan Schoron means the gift, there's a gift element, a gift aspect that God gives us in the reward. It means that I didn't even do anything. Sometimes you can get more reward doing something little than something big, which doesn't have an effect. So when it comes to mitzvahs, we don't know what the effects are. Now, let's go to Kaleb for a second. What happened in the story here? Let's go back to the story for a second. Kaleb and the spies come back. The first thing to do, the spies do, the Kaleb says, oh boy, they're a bunch of giants, and boy, this is not a good idea. What is the reaction of the Jewish people at the moment that the spies speak? What's the reaction at that moment? Like, which is an avera. It's a sin. Because Moshe Rabbeinu said it's a good land, and you're going to go in, and you have nothing to get nervous about, and the fact that they're getting you rattled is a flaw in you. What are you getting rattled for? I told you it's good. The instant they go, that's a flaw. What does Kaleb do? Kaleb says, no, we could go in. It's good. So what happens at that point? At least some of the people feel, you know what, he's right. And then what happens? The spies say, no, they're gonna destroy us. They're gonna what? And the people start crying. God decrees the people are going to be stuck for 40 years in the desert. Let me ask you a question, gentlemen. Did Kaleb accomplish anything? At the end of the day, the people all cried. Did he accomplish anything or not? What did he accomplish? What?
Short amount of time that they weren't crying.
Short amount. But at the end of the day, they were crying. What was accomplished in that short amount of time? So let's go back to the hospital. When the doctor's about to pull the plug, and you get your hand on his what do you call it? And he's about to pull the plug. You kept it off for a minute. That you all agreed, Aaron, where are you, Aaron? You all agreed that at that moment he's accomplished something, right? What did he do? He kept him alive for a minute. That's what's called, in the Gemara, called it Chaye Sha'ah. Keeping a guy alive even for a short amount of time. Chaye Sha'ah. That's a concrete, tangible accomplishment. The same way that there's a concrete, tangible accomplishment for physical, there's a concrete accomplishment for a neshama. Now, what does that mean? That means, let's say you have a friend, and you try to convince him, maybe you want to check out Shabbos and Judaism, and he shows some sort of interest. He comes to your house for a Shabbos, makes a couple of brachas, then you see him 10 years later and nothing has changed. Right? He's the same, he hasn't moved one iota religiously. And then you feel, wow, what a waste. Nothing happened, mistake. For those few moments that he had the correct attitude, his neshama there's a concrete, tangible accomplishment. Why is Kaleb going to be rewarded? Kaleb is rewarded for a concrete accomplishment. What was the concrete accomplishment? Exactly what you said, Moshe. For those few moments that Kaleb spoke, there were at least some people in Klal Yisrael, among the Jewish people, for those few moments, there were at least some people who had a change of attitude, which means they were doing tshuva. You know what, we really shouldn't be thinking this. You know what, he's right. He's right, we can go in. That's tshuva, they've done tshuva. You got a person to do tshuva for a few moments. That's a concrete, tangible accomplishment. Then the Meraglim, the spies, speak again, and everybody gets all for tumult again, and they all start crying again. Okay, that's the result. But what about that gap? What about those few moments? Those few moments are what's called a concrete, tangible accomplishment. And for that concrete, tangible accomplishment, Kaleb is now rewarded with going into Eretz Yisrael. So you see, when you do a mitzvah, you have no idea what the effect is. You can't imagine it. People ask me, what's the success rate at Ohr Somayach? I've been asked that many times over the years by people know that I'm involved at Ohr Somayach. What's the success rate? Well, I said, well, not much, because they haven't made a Baal Tshuva out of me yet, so then and I've been here for over 30 years. No, really. What's the success rate? 100%. 100%. How do you like that, gentlemen? 100%. Why? Because every single person who walks into Ohr Somayach learns one word of Torah, that's a success right there. One word of Torah is a success. You could do better. It's like when I got a 71 on a test. 71? Well, why are you looking at what I missed? Why don't you look what I hit? I told you I got an 85 on my chemistry midterm. Impressed, Elio? Good. It was out of 200 points, right? But what do you call it was? My teacher wasn't impressed. True story. The next highest grade was a 114. I remember that. He called me over, Mr. Kaplan. I think you're having some trouble. I wanted to say, yeah, it's the teacher, but I didn't. I minded my manners, right? So 85, 80. I told him, 85 is good. Why are you looking at the misses? The answer is, you're right. It could be better. Could be better. And if the guy stays from and the guy down the line becomes, he becomes Shomer Shabbos, Shomer Torah Mitzvahs, yeah. But what about what happened right now? What happened right now is a concrete, tangible accomplishment, no different than keeping a guy's hand off the plug in the hospital. Why does Kaleb get this reward? He gets a reward. He's going to go in, and him and his children, because what he accomplished is a concrete, tangible reward. Okay? One more point. If you take a look on the next page, I just want one last point. So this is where God starts telling the Jewish people, page 808, about the middle of the page, Pasuk Lamed Gimel. So this is a question that many people ask. When God is telling the Jewish people, look, you didn't want to go into the land. You didn't want to go into the land. You ever hear the punishment has to suit the crime. Oh, you didn't want to go into the land? Okay. So then I'll make sure you don't go into the land, since that's what you were fetching about. That's your punishment. You're not going into your land. Your children will, but you are. Over you, the entire generation is going to die. So what does it say over here? Take a look at the middle of page Lamed Gimel. If you find it, please show the person next to you. Uveneyem you roim bamidbar arboim shana. V'nasu ezenusechem atom pigrechem b'migor. Your children are going to wander the desert till you guys die. Now pay attention very carefully. Pasuk Lamed Daled. It's very subtle. B'mispar hayamim asher tartem esartz. For the number of days that you spied the land, arboim yom, 40 days, yom l'shana, 1 day per year, tisu es avonosechem, arboim shana. You bear your iniquities for 40 years. V'yadatem es tnuasin. You know my response. So you notice over here, there's something strange. It's a strange turn of phrase. What is it? Yeah, it says a day for a year. You're going to get punished a day for a year. What should it really say? A year for a day. Why does it say you're going to get punished a day for a year? Yom l'shana, yom l'shana. I'm not getting punished a day for a year. They weren't there 40 years. They were there 40 days. The punishment is 40 years. So it should really say a year for a day. Why does it say a day for a year, a day for a year? So there are two answers that I've seen. It's a good question. Many commentaries talk about this. There are two answers I've seen. One answer is, when did they die? Jewish people, God in his kindness, in spite of the punishment, there was 1 day a year. You know what they did? Oh boy. All of the men on the night of Tisha B'Av, they all dug graves. And they all got into the graves. And the next morning, 15,000 people did not get up. Talk about a Shabbos nap, right? The next morning, 15,000 people did not get up. And it was only 1 day out of the year. The rest of the year, you could relax. Otherwise, you're thinking like any day, everybody's going to just start collapsing all over the place. No. One day out of the year, and then you just kind of said Shema Yisrael before you went to sleep, and you just kind of like, and you're just lying there, and either you got up or you didn't. So for 40 years, 15,000, make the calculation, it comes out to 600,000. 15,000 a year.
It's like Yid roulette.
Yiddish roulette, yeah, Jewish roulette. And you get into the grave, probably a discomforting feeling. Listen, I had a guy here once that told me he was, I think he was hiking in the backwoods of Virginia. I think he said somewhere in Virginia, out in the woods, and it was getting dark, so he decided he needs to go to sleep. And this guy who was, he's into camping and, one of these Jungle Joes or whatever. So he's looking for a place to lie down for the night. So he sees there's a little ridge. Little ridge in the what he goes. So he lies down in this thing, and good. He goes to sleep. Has a nice comfortable. He wakes up in the morning. He's got some cobwebs on him, and then he looks around. He checks, and right behind this little ridge there's a cross. He had slept in a grave. Yeah, that's bad. You want to try to avoid that. That was somewhere in Virginia, right? So stick to the cities, guys. So what do you call it? So the first approach here is that it's Yom L'Shana, one day out of the year. Now, the next question is, but it's not fair. Why should we get a year for a day? If it was 40 days, give me 40 days in the why a year? In other words, number one, what does it mean? Why the structure of the word? Yom L'Shana means one day out of the year is going to be the punishment. But the bigger question, why should it be 40 years? Why 40 years? Why a year per day? Why such a severe punishment? So I saw one of the first he says, Yom L'Shana, there's another day for the year that works in our favor. Anybody know what day that is? Yeah, very good. What'd you say? Yom Kippur. Very good. That means we could goof around all year, and then one day we can wipe the slate clean. None of us complain about that. That we're okay with. We misbehave all year, and then you have one day out of the year as Yom Kippur, and that cleans everything up. That we're okay with, and nobody complains about that. Okay, Yom L'Shana. The same thing with a punishment. The same way that when there's got to be a counterbalance. You get punished, it's a year for the day. You want to clean the slate, it's also a year for a day. That's how it works. It balances out in both directions, and therefore, from this point on, it's going to be 40 years, and the Jewish people, as a result of this, that generation does not go into the land of Israel. All right.
Thank you,
Okay. I was here. You're going to love this. I was there. Nick, you hear this? I was in Ohr Somayach. Aaron, listen to this. I was in Ohr Somayach. And they used to have over here, we had a Sephardi division. We had a Sephardi division in Ohr Somayach. There was an Israeli division. So they used to eat lunch in different shifts. So I would come in to eat lunch, and they were finishing their shift, and then we'd come in to eat lunch. So there was one Israeli Sephardi guy, who he was always kind of, I guess they ate a long lunch or something, and then he'd be benching. Yeah, I'd come in ways this guy was benching. Now, when this guy was benching, it was he'd be singing it, a lot of hand motions, by himself. He'd just sitting there singing it. So the first time, a couple of times I saw him, I was like, it's about Tshuva, his fever's a bit high, got to turn it down a little bit. And I watch him day after day. This happened, and then at a certain point, I was looking at this guy, thinking, hey, this guy's really benching. This guy's really benching. I wish I would bench like that. Then I thought to myself, you know what, I ought to. I didn't do that. And there was none of this. But I went home, and I just became a little more conscientious of my benching because this guy. And then one day I decided, I got to thank the guy. The guy influenced me. I got to thank the guy. I decided next day I'm going to thank him. I came back the next day. He wasn't there. Never saw him again. Eliyahu Hanavi. True story. I never saw the guy again.